This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
I am Jeremy D'Entremont. A lot of you know me. I've known some of you for a very long time. It's nice to have you here. I'm the historian for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. I host the Society's podcast, Lighthearted. And it's my pleasure to introduce another one of these special Zoom events that we have every so often. This is another event where we're concentrating on one lighthouse, in this case, Hillsboro Inlet in Florida. We've done two previous events much like this. We did Point Arena Lighthouse in California and Bolivar Point in Texas. I'm sure a lot of you came to both of those. They were both, I thought, really interesting events. So today's subject again is Hillsboro Inlet in Florida, a very fascinating light station. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then turn it over to Ralph Krugler, historian for Hillsboro Inlet, who's going to do much of the presenting here today. But first, I want to introduce Jeff Gales. As probably most of you know, Jeff is the executive director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, which of course is based at the beautiful Point No Point Light Station in Washington. How's it going, Jeff?
Going great. Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good. It's a little cool and windy here today. So that's why I'm wearing a hoodie. It doesn't feel like summer here on the New Hampshire seacoast. It's like 60 and windy, but it's nice.
In the Pacific Northwest, you'll be surprised that it's raining today.
Wow, what a shock.
A shocker.
Yeah, but it's beautiful even in the rain.
It is. Things are green here. We like that.
Yeah, it's very green. And I was just telling Ralph before we get started, the picture behind me, you would probably nobody here would guess what lighthouse that is. The lens, it looks like I'm inside here because of the virtual background I have here. It's actually a replica lens. It's one of the acrylic lenses made by Artworks Florida, Dan Spinella, who I think a lot of you know about, and makes fantastic lens replicas. And this one is in the Buffalo, Maine Lighthouse in New York. I was just there a few days ago, and it's a beautiful replica. So I just like the picture, so I threw it up here. Let me just say a little bit about Hillsboro Inlet Lighthouse, then introduce Ralph. Hillsboro Inlet Lighthouse is on the north side of Hillsboro Inlet, midway between Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton in Hillsboro Beach, Florida. The light marks the northern limit of the Florida Reef, which is an underwater coral formation on the lower east coast of the state. And the lighthouse began service in 1907. The Hillsborough Lighthouse Preservation Society was founded in 1997 for the purpose of preserving the historic light station in its original form for the safety, enjoyment, and education of the public. And if you want to read more, you're going to get a lot more information today, but if you want to explore more about it, you can go to the website hillsboroughlighthouse.org. So Ralph Krugler is the historian for the Hillsborough Lighthouse Preservation Society. He's written a book called The Almost Complete History of the Hillsboro Inlet Lighthouse. It's a really impressive book. I'll tell you, it's heavy reading. It's got to be one of the heaviest books I've ever seen, which is a compliment. If you want to know anything about Hillsboro Lighthouse, you got to get that book. Ralph spent, he can maybe say a little bit more about it, but I believe you spent at least 4 or 5 years or something like that researching. Yeah. And he did an amazing job. So that is available through the website. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about it. But Ralph is also doing work for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. He's helping with the ongoing development of the online J. Candace Clifford Lighthouse research catalog, also helping to increase the USLHS presence on social media. There's some really cool stuff going on social media wise with the society as well, and Ralph's very much involved with that. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Ralph, we're going to start with a presentation on the history of the lighthouse. Then we're going to do a VR tour, and we've got some other fun things planned as well. So Ralph, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Not sure if you've ever been to Hillsborough Lighthouse before or really know much about it. But like Jeremy said, I did write a rather lengthy book on the subject. So I'm going to do a quick presentation on the history, which is rather painful because it's very, very brief. But it's painful for me because how brief it is, not hopefully for you. So I'm going to do a little quick screen share here. Are you seeing this now? Okay, I can't.
Yes, I'm seeing it. We're seeing
Perfect.
it.
Okay, so welcome to Hillsborough. First day of service was March 8th, 1907, but actually the first proposal for Lighthouse came back all the way back in 1852, which was the same time they put in one for Jupiter. So if you don't know exactly where we are, here we are located on the map. And so from Cape Canaveral down to Fowey Rocks, this all was dark. So they wanted obviously to have it lit up, because as the ships were coming down the Lighthouse Trail, as we like to call it, they were hugging the coast because you have the Gulf Stream coming close to the state right here. Also, like Jeremy said, we do have 3 reefs that also start right from here. So as they're coming down to avoid the Gulf Stream, they're getting racked on the reefs out here. So it wasn't until the Copenhagen sank in 1900 that Congress finally enacted an act and got their act together, let's say. They approved $90,000 for a station. William Craighill was the engineer for the 7th and 8th districts. So he came down, took a bunch of different boring tests, and he chose this site because underneath there's actually a coral head, and he was hoping to actually drill into that to give it more stability. So when the contracts went out, he hired a contractor from just up the beach here in West Palm Beach to build everything at the station except for the tower. So they built 3 keepers' cabins. So this was the keeper, first assistant, second assistant. Each had a storehouse behind it. Your privy was in the back. They're in the process here of building the oil house. There would be a wharf and a boathouse here too. And while all this was going on up in Detroit, the Russell Wheelan Foundry was assembling the lighthouse. And this is not a completely unique tower. There were 3 built before this, so they're just copying off those plans. Just had to make it shorter for what they wanted at Hillsborough. So once this was all assembled, they disassembled it, packed it in crates, put it on lighthouse tenders, shipped it out of Detroit, up Lake Huron, down Lake Michigan, made its way over to Mississippi, came out, and then was docked in Miami. Here it was offloaded onto barges. And instead of going up the ocean, they actually had the precursor to what's now the Florida or the Intercoastal Waterway, which is called the Florida East Coast Canal at the time. So they came up, made a little turn here at the inlet. Obviously there's nothing here at the time. And when they came out, they would come out here, load it up on shore here, and unloaded everything and assemble the tower. So obviously assembling the tower takes some skill and some know-how. And before they actually started building it, one of the things they did was they poured the foundations. So there's 8 legs to it. So there's 8 foundations. These go down about 12 feet. And inside here, they had to put 3 iron rods that are threaded at the top. So the lighthouse is actually threaded in there and held in place. So this gives it a lot of extra stability and security in this kind of environment, because you can see if there's a bad storm, how much sand can actually wash away from the area. So they needed to make sure that it was going to be a stable thing, because they actually wanted to build a replica of the Bolivar Lighthouse here, but the undersurface was not suitable for it, and it was been too expensive. So they chose a skeletal design instead. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any actual photographs of that, but David Butler, one of our founders, did a couple of sketches showing how it was done with steam cranes and lifting everything up into place. So they lifted up into place, they put planking on here, and they would climb up by ladders. And that's also how they were painting the lighthouse every year. So every section has a number stamp on it. So every piece has a number stamp. And so as they unbox the pieces, they would just go by numbers. And these 8 numbers correspond with the 8 legs of the lighthouse. So if you look on here, everything on this piece has got a number 1 stamped on it. And same thing as with the cylinder all the way up to the top. So as they did by sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, made it very easy for me to put it back together again. And this whole thing is slotted and screwed together. So in case they needed to dismantle and move to another location, they were able to do so. So if you think of like the old erector sets when you were a kid, this is basically what they did with this. So before the lantern was put on top, they actually had to lift the pedestal and put it into place because otherwise there's no way to get it in there. So this was lifted and put into place. The lantern was put on top, and then a lampist came in and assembled the frame, put all the prisms in, made sure everything was working perfectly. And he did an excellent job, except for there's one thing down here with the clockwork. Now, I'm sure most people on here know what the clockwork is, but just in case, pre-electricity, these things turned via clockwork like a grandfather clock. A weight would descend through the tower, and that would turn the gears and rotate the lens. Well, we have a second order lens, but they found the clockwork cabling was actually for a fifth order, so it's much thinner diameter, and it kept bunching up on the gears because it just couldn't handle the weight. There was 100-pound weight on here that could be adjusted, and it just couldn't handle it, so I kept having problems. So we know of at least 3 times that it had to stop. So what they did was they woke the keeper that was not on duty. So 2 keepers took apart the clockwork, and then as you'll see later, there's a set of stairs that come up here. And he actually sat at the top of the landing here, the 3rd keeper, and rotated the lens by hand. Now, we had a 10-second flash back then. Now it's 20 seconds, but it was a 10-second flash. So he sat there with a stopwatch. They all had a stopwatch because they had to time the lens flash every 4 times an hour. And so he sat there making sure that he was rotating it every 10 seconds. And we know the longest he ever did that for was for 5 hours. So that was very, probably a boring job for the night. But imagine if he was off by a little bit and a ship noted it, they could get ridden up and had a lot of trouble come to the station. But they finally figured out what the problem was and got that fixed. So here we are, March 8th, 1907. Basically, here's a full station, what it looked like back then. We lost the boathouse and the dock in the hurricane of 1926, but for the most part, this is the way it stayed. This was our original day mark. This stayed until 1969 when there's Australian pines growing on the station, and they completely obliterated all the white. They were growing up into the black here. And the reason why it's white and black was when you're offshore, the white would be offset from the foliage behind, the black would be offset by the sky. But like I said, the trees were completely blocking this, so they couldn't see. So they changed this to white. And we're hoping next year when we do our repainting, we're in the process with the ACE Navigation to actually return to the original day mark next year. Hasn't been approved yet, but that's what we're hoping for. Now, this was actually taken in 1914, but if basically nothing had changed. If you were at the top of the tower from the first day of service and you look north, this is what you would see. If you look southwest, you would see this isn't the canal. This is actually another body of water that really doesn't exist anymore. The canal is completely blocked by trees. But here in the distance, you see the village of Pompano, which would have been on the railroad tracks that went eventually all the way down to Key West, the overseas railway. So of our keepers, our first 3, Burgell, Keyes, and Thompson. Burgell, I think they should make a movie of his life. His life was so fascinating. He lived by honor, and when Hillsborough got switched from the 7th district to the 6th district, his new boss and him butted heads and impugned his honor. And there's a long story with that I won't get into now, but he wound up resigning in 1911. Henry Keyes, we really don't know anything about, unfortunately, other than he didn't really seem to want to work too hard. And Robert Thompson had a long career, but you can see he was only here briefly. Well, he was married to
Ralph, I don't know. I think we may have, I think Ralph is frozen. I think we may have a connectivity issue. We'll give it a moment here.
Julia Frau, who was a
Whoops,
sister.
excuse me, excuse me,
and
Ralph.
they
Excuse me.
asked about I believe they got homesick because they transferred back.
Ralph, whoop. Okay, yeah, we got some kind of internet connection issue, I think, with Ralph here. Whoop.
Ralph's very happy keeping going, even though we can't hear him.
Yeah, and now I think he's gone. He's gonna have to sign back
He's
in.
on now.
So
I'm
Jeff,
back.
Jeff, you and I can sing a duet or something maybe.
We
while
got
we're-
a vamp. Oh, there's Ralph.
Okay,
Oh, there he is.
I'm back.
Yeah, we lost you for lost you for a moment there. We if you go back, I think we were still on the previous slide, weren't we, when we lost you? Yeah, you were talking about Keys and Thompson there.
Okay.
And
So Thompson, sorry about that, everybody. He was married to Julia Frau, who was the sister and daughter of the keepers at Fowey Rocks, and that's where he was stationed before he came here. And I think they were just homesick and wanted to get pulled back there, because Thompson actually had a lot of family living back in that area too. So after that, we had a succession of keepers. Thomas Knight was our longest serving keeper from 1911 to 36, except for a short period of time in 1919. But he was given numerous awards and commendations, and he really was one of the rock stars of the lighthouse keeping service. But not many people know about him, and it's one of the things I'm actually trying to change to give him the recognition that he truly deserves. Shouldn't be a surprise that he was so good, because his grandfather was Mills O'Burnham, who ran Cape Canaveral for over 30 years. His blood basically ran Canaveral for over 80 years. And there's a guy here named James Knight who married Mary Burnham. They were the parents of Thomas Knight. And both Knights actually had started their career at Cape Canaveral as well. When they moved down here, they quickly learned that the lighthouse was the place to be, and everybody came from all over the place, whether it was the natives or it was the locals. And by locals, there's Delray to the north, Boca Raton to the north, Deerfield to the north, Pompano to the southwest, and Fort Lauderdale to the south. And these people had nothing to do. So what did? They got in their boats and they all came up and spent the day, mostly on the weekends, at the lighthouse. And the keepers, of course, had to be welcoming hosts, even though they had a lot of other things to do, but they had to be very welcoming, give tours. And let's be honest, when you go up in a lighthouse now and you go up to the top, you get that first view over the top, you know how impressive it is, no matter what tower you go to. Well, go back to 1911, 1912. The tallest building you're probably ever going to go in is either 1 or 2 stories. So imagine how thrilled they were with the view that they got for the first time. So you can, that and them being such a technological marvel, because they actually got to go in and see the lens back then. So these people were coming by not only the dozens, but maybe sometimes the hundreds on the weekends. So we had a lot of assistant keepers over the years. Judge Isler was our longest serving. He arrived in 1920 with his wife and 2 kids. They had 3 more kids at the station. His wife, Marion, was 25 years younger than him. So this is their daughter, Ruth, who was only 15. And he was 69. This is the week that he was retiring. They're featured in the newspaper. And she was probably the most upset by it, because this was her this is her home. This is everything she knew, and she was being forced to move out. But before that, let's go back to a little story from 1921. This is obviously much later than 1921, but the Everglades was all out here to the west. Wildfires were being lit out here all the time because of lightning strikes. Well, one time in 1921, one struck up here up on the barrier island. And they noted for days that, they saw smoke and they could see all this. And so they wanted to go see just how bad it was. So Knight and Isler hopped into the station boat, went up the canal, all the way to Deerfield, did a little business, saw exactly what was going on. They hustled back. They came back. They told the first assistant, Gus Phelps, what was going on. So one guy had to stay at the station, whereas the other 2 went up. We're not exactly sure where up on the barrier island here. They took picks, shovels, axes, and buckets. And what they did was they cleared a 10-foot wide swath from canal to the ocean. And they dug everything down to sand. They put everything on the north side, did a back burn over here. And while that was going on, they were taking buckets of water and dousing everything on the south side, because this thing had a northerly wind and it was just pushing down. Meanwhile, Gus was with the families down here packing everything up in case they needed to hop over here. Well, fortunately, their plan worked, and when the fire got here, there was nothing left to burn. It went out. Now, they did all that in a single day. Now, this was taken a few years after, and this gives you a little bit better idea of what we're talking about. So you have lowland, rises up here, and you can see the thicket, just how tough this stuff was. And then add some trees in there too, and this ridge went over to the other side. So for these two guys to do all that in a single day was phenomenal. So the next day, Knight wrote up his incident report like he always had to do, send it off to his boss. His boss would always answer to the back here. And here you can see it is recommended that the above named employees be commended by the department. So he sent it off to his boss, Herbert Hoover, who agreed and said, government is pleased to commend you for the services rendered on this occasion, which will be noted on the records as part of your official history. This was their reward. There's no financial bonus in their next paycheck. This was all they got. But they also had the satisfaction knowing that their houses were still there and they still had jobs. So the tower is painted every year, which was a big hassle and probably the biggest danger that there was, because like I said, they had to put ladders up, put planking across here and stand on there while one guy hung down by a bosun's chair. They did the exterior every year, pretty much. The interior every 3 years. The cottages, the storehouses, the fence, even the cisterns got a little bit of paint on there. And everything, you have to remember, everything was lead-based. The primer was, the paint was. You're also dealing with mercury because the lens floated on mercury, and all that was done without PPE. And I honestly believe that this is what did Thomas Knight in, because he was just a shell of a man when he retired. You saw how young and robust he was there at the first photograph. Well, he retired, and I mean, if I would read you the doctor's report of what was wrong with him, you would not believe it. So 1932, we're electrified. There was actually 3 bulbs in there at the time. This was one of the later versions. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of the first. In 1934, fresh water was pumped in for the first time. Prior to this, everything came from rainfall. Came off your roof, down some gutters, and to your cistern, which was underneath your breezeway. If they didn't get enough rainwater, they actually had to go down to Fort Lauderdale and get caskets of it. And so they bring barrels of fresh water up. They didn't have to do that too often. So this is Thomas Knight. This is Fanny Knight. She died in 1935. And if you believe how old she is here in this photograph, you would be shocked. She's only, she's only 55 years old when she died. Thomas Knight retired the next year at 1936. He died in 1938. He was only 59. And this is probably taken probably about 1933. So you can see just how weathered he was by that time. So Ben Stone was our next keeper. He had actually been an assistant here previously with his wife, Annie, and their son, Frederick. So when they came back, they had a bigger family. Here he is, older, their dog Buster. They also brought with the other family pet, Joe the alligator, which unfortunately a really long story that I can't get into, but he made the trip from Cape Canaveral along with them. So Stone stayed on. 1939, when the switch was over to the Coast Guard, he actually wanted to stay on. Unfortunately, he had a heart issue, so he was forcibly retired early. Warren Bennett, who was actually healing from his own illnesses in the time in a hospital, was offered the position of being the officer in charge or the keeper of the lighthouse. He thought, lighthouse duty, great, I can get stronger, better, and it's going to be really, really easy duty. Well, look what year he started in, 1941. So he starts November. In January, these two gentlemen come down to the area. They were staying at the Secretary of State's house just up the mile here. Bennett was put in charge of security for these two men and keeping this as hush-hush as possible. So he was already in a wheelchair. He was not. He was up and around. People saw him, and somehow they kept a lid on it as best they could. Then the U.S. enters the World War. Now we have, for a short while, a mounted patrol being run out of the station before they got moved off site. We don't actually have a picture of it, but there's actually a civilian beach patrol that was also running on the site. Bennett was in charge of issuing everybody their weapons for every shift. And you can see down here, we had these little towers. They were all up and down the coastline, and they decided to put one here at Hillsborough. Why, I don't know, because we have a giant tower right here next to it. But this was also run by Bennett. What you can't see here is the hundreds and hundreds of guys who came through the station that Bennett had to be in charge of, teaching, keeping fit, making sure they stayed out of trouble. And these guys were 19 to 22-year-old guys with nothing to do other than get in trouble. And somehow Bennett kept a lid on almost everything and ran a really great station here. And he said when he got done, this was actually the hardest duty he had to do the entire time in the Coast Guard. So we had a succession of keepers over the next number of years. In the 40s, in 1944, we actually got a beacon tower put in here. They put this building in here. And for every hour, we broadcast the letter Q. If you don't really understand what this was the precursor to GPS. So you would triangulate between your charts and the radio beacon and either celestial navigation or daytime markers. And so this was, like I said, pre-GPS. And this really became the focus of the lighthouse station after the war. And most of the records revolve around keeping this thing up and running. They did less and less with the lighthouse and more here. But over time, like I said, as they're doing less and less with the lighthouse, it's really becoming neglected over time. And the keepers are pretty much becoming caretakers of the property. And so the keeper lived here. The assistant position after the war was over, this was emptied out. This became the admiral's private vacation place. So anytime the admiral wanted to stay here, or he had a VIP friend who wanted to stay here, like one week we had Admiral Nimitz and his family stay here. So VIPs like that got to stay in this cottage. Meanwhile, that storehouse was converted into the cruise quarters. So you had 3 guys bunking in this place, and they were here until 1973 when the station was automated. And from that point on, the keeper was really just a groundskeeper and in charge of the cottages. And eventually this was no longer the admiral's cottage, but it came for rental, as did the storehouse. So it became less of a keeper and more of a almost a hotelier, so to speak. And everything went great until 1992 when the light broke down. What had happened was nobody was going in the tower really. It was automated. And so all the mercury was starting to evaporate, and this whole room was toxic. Couldn't go in there. And they found a number of problems along with the mercury toxicity, but the lens gear drive system had just worn down because nobody had taken care of it. So the Coast Guard didn't know what they wanted to do. They were even considering, not only taking the lens out, but even maybe dismantling the tower for a little bit. That's when the Hillsborough Lighthouse Preservation Society came into being. And it's what I like to call the right people coming together at the right time to form, with the right talents to form. Somebody's got their, thank you. To form the society, who actually petitioned the Coast Guard to not only let them save the lens, but actually do some work on the tower. They convinced the Coast Guard to do it so that we wouldn't be running by this little beacon or a modern optic inside here. So the Coast Guard agreed. The Coast Guard at that point actually said, not only can you guys fix, do your best to fix the lens, take the mercury was taken out. They put a ball bearing system in there, but the Coast Guard at that time said, we're going to actually restore the tower for you guys. So we're going to work hand in hand and see how well it goes. And it's been pretty much working ever since. So we have the contract to maintain the light in the tower. And so anything that's done, we raise the funds for. We do as much of the work as possible. What we can't, we hire out. And the light was relit in 1999. There's a little snafu. It was relit in 2000, and pretty much ever since then, it's been running, fairly well without any issues. Last year, we converted to LED. We have been known for the longest time as the brightest lighthouse in the world. That's an active aid to navigation. There are 2 lighthouses that we know that reach out a greater distance, They're privately owned. They're not on all the time. And since we switched to LED, we actually don't know how far we go now. We used to be 28 nautical miles. We're still trying to acquire a boat to take us out and see where we're at now. And that pretty much takes us up through today. And like I said, hopefully that wasn't painful for you, because that was for me, because I left out so much stuff. So if there's any questions, let's take them now, please.
Yeah, I'll open up for questions in a moment. But I just want to, a couple of things. First of all, thank you for reining it in. That was really fascinating. I know you were holding back on some areas like Keeper Burgell. I think there's a lot more, obviously, you could talk about. Joe the alligator is kind of a tease.
Yeah.
And the statue you just showed at the end, that's the barefoot.
We'll get into that.
Right.
Yep,
Okay.
we'll get into that
too. So maybe we do a little bit of Q&A now, but then we're going to do the VR portion, and we can do more Q&A a little bit later. Does anybody have any? Well, before I continue with what I just started to say, let me say a couple of other things. One is that I should have said this at the beginning. Please, everybody except for anybody who's presenting, keep your mics muted. I should have said that at the beginning. You were all automatically muted when it started, but make sure you keep your mics muted. And also, I should mention that this is being recorded. There'll be just a little bit of editing done to it, and it'll be put on the USLHS YouTube channel and also on the USLHS website within a couple of days, or early in the week. I would say Monday or Tuesday it should be up, in case you want to see it again, or if you miss anything, or tell your friends or whatever. So I just want to get those in. So if anybody has any questions now.
I see one here at the bottom. Oops, it just disappeared. Hang on.
Oh, a question in the chat. Yeah, the chat is the easiest way to ask questions, so I would recommend that.
Yes, it is open to the public.
Good question.
Okay.
Hey,
So,
Ralph, the lens at Hillsborough is very special. Can you describe the lens? I remember seeing it firsthand. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But before he answers that, if he could just finish that thought about, is the lighthouse open? Do you want to say what the story is with tours right now?
Yeah. Okay. So the HLPS, we run tours once a month. We try to get more, but Coast Guard said our cottages are now available for rental. We don't want this to become, a big interruption to our people staying there. Plus, we don't have direct street access. So we do one tour a month, and we charter a boat, and it takes us from a hotel on the canal to our dock. And we either do like a half day will be 4 tours, a full day will be 7 tours. And it's usually on a Saturday. There's 2 on Sundays. And it is typically the second weekend of the month.
Okay. And that's all on the website, right? All the information people need is
correct.
Hillsborough-lighthouse.org. So Jeff is commenting on the incredible lens.
Yeah. So the lens, let me actually pull that back up. Okay, so we have okay, so we don't have the beehive shape. We were originally supposed to be a first order lens. Well, by the time the station was built, these beehive, or the bivalve or clamshell lenses have gotten a lot better, a lot stronger. And so Craig Hill was offered a first order that had been sitting in storage in Tompkinsville. And he said, I can actually get a brand new one, cheaper, smaller, and more powerful for less money. So he actually bought a brand new lens. And what's brilliant about this is just the design of it. Let me get to the center of it here. So you can see how, concave or convex, depending on which side you're standing on. So what's beautiful about this is the way the thing is layered, and all these things every single one of these is a prism, and even in through here. So these are all put together. These are all separated. Now, when we actually do the VR tour, we're going to be inside the lens. So you're going to get a much better visualization of what actually this thing looks like. But this actually captured much more light than the beehives did somehow. And they magnify, this thing magnifies out to 5.5 million candle powers. That's how brilliantly designed this bivalve was. And as far as we know, we're the only second order that's still in operation. The rest are in museums. But this, just to be able to be inside this thing and see how this thing works is truly amazing. We have a little bit better, clearer view of that. So
sorry, I was just going to say, Ralph, I just put up a picture behind me. It's kind of in the middle, so I'm blocking a little bit. But this is a second order bivalve lens that's on display at the Shipwreck Museum at Whitefish Point, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think, pretty similar to yours, right? It's from White Shoal Light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks almost identical except for the platform here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Okay. Have you had to replace the bearing since it was first installed? Yes. So when they put the bearings in 1999, they put in a bearing size that was a little too small. So they got crushed by the weight of the lens after 1 month. So they went back and got bearings that are actually used in windmills. It's a larger diameter. And so since we put those in since 2000, they have not had to been replaced at all. We just did a check of them last year and they look brand new still inside there.
Mm-hmm.
So maintenance, like we check it once a year. We check the oil in there, and what we do is we take a little bit of oil, we send it off to mobile labs, and they run it through some tests to see if there's any metal shavings in there. And so far, we've had a great experience with it.
I'm so glad that lens is still in the lighthouse. It's a great thing.
Yeah, they were really close to taking it out.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there are any other questions people have for now. We can do more questions in a little while.
I have a question. I'm not sure whether you can see me.
Yes.
How much money have you raised over the years for the lighthouse?
Oh, froze.
And you mentioned the keepers' cottages. They're rented out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Is that by the Coast Guard, or who was doing the renting of those?
Okay, originally they were rented out just to Coast Guard, but they were just switched over to what's called MWR. So if you were in any branch of this service at any time, you now have access to rent those out. If you were just a civilian, never served, then you do not have access to rent those.
Yeah. And there was
How about
another
the question of money?
Oh, money. That's unfortunately, that is not a question I can answer, but we do a fundraising gala every March to coincide with our first day of service. And this past gala, boy, what did we raise? We raised, what was it? Boy, I can't even think now. I mean, I want to say $35,000, but it might have been more than that from just the one event.
Wow.
Yeah, but we were invited to not the Coast Guard, but there's a group that helps Coast Guard people, and all they do is fundraise. And we were invited by one of the former admirals this past year, and we saw how they run their auctions, and it blew us away. They raised over $200,000 in 15 minutes. And so we now know how to run an auction better at our fundraiser, but with an operating budget, we need anywhere like about $100,000, more or less, per year for different projects. So we have to raise that at pretty much every single year. So how much have we done over the years? I really can't say, because some years is more than others.
Yeah. I might need to ask you for auction tips, Ralph. That's pretty amazing. Was it the Coast Guard Foundation you're talking about?
That's it. Yes. Thank you.
I know they raise money to support Coast Guard families and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we could move along to the VR portion of our program now.
Okay.
So Ralph's going to lead us on a VR tour of the lighthouse and grounds. If you attended the earlier events we did on Point Arena and Bolivar Point, we had VR tours as parts of those as well. And I thought they were really Really excellent. It seems to lend itself to lighthouses, I think. So it enables people who can't actually climb the lighthouse to almost have the experience of climbing the lighthouse. So it's pretty cool. So Ralph, are you ready to start the VR tour?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay, so like I said, if you were coming on a tour, you'd arrive on a boat. So you come to our dock, and so here we are. We're just going to do a 360 now. One of our Coast Guard auxiliaries, Carlos Arenas, was kind enough to loan us his camera and came out and took all these photos for us. And it's an amazing setup. All these photographs are, thousands of them are stitched together to give you this incredible view. So there's the inlet looking out towards the ocean. There's the multi-million-dollar homes across the inlet. And in the back there's the actual inlet. So if you come on a boat, you'll be coming down the waterway, come out and actually come up to our dock here. Here is our dredge system, because if this is not here they're here all the time now, but when they weren't, our inlet can close up, and it did close up several times since the lighthouse started, and actually had to go out and dig it out by hand in order to get it going again. So let's go up the road here. So you come up. So Keeper's Cottage, and here's the storehouse, obviously the lighthouse. And we're gonna go up the back way. Most people don't go this way, but we're gonna go up the ramp here. Now, when this first started, all this area was marshland. This didn't actually get filled in with gravel and rock until 1943. Stop that, head on up. So the cottages that are available for rental are the old storage shed. This is a single bedroom. The assistant keeper's cottage, there's one bedroom down here. There's two bedrooms up top. So I believe this sleeps 8, as does the former keeper's cottage. Here's the radio building, built in 1943. So the original generator that powered the lighthouse when the power went out was held in this part of the building. This was all the radio equipment, and then the radio aerial used to be right outside here. Now, we never had a fog belt because it didn't really get foggy here very often. But in 1984, Jerry Vosberg was here, and he brought this bell from a scrap heap that he found, a Coast Guard scrap heap up in Jacksonville. He was doing some welding work, and he knew he was coming here, and he'd done some work here before. So he bought one bell, but it had a big crack in it. He went back at lunch the next day, found this one, bought this. Now, to get it this thing shipped down here, he actually had to bribe 2 coasties with a truck a case of coffee, which was really the big thing at the time. So he bribed him with a case of coffee, brought it down to Miami, then another case to get it up here. The guy who came after him, Tom Skolimbeski, decided he was going to build a little monument here for the keepers as best he knew. Unfortunately, some of the names are wrong. But you can see we also have a memorial brick patio here that if you want to, you can memorialize somebody out here. So when the beach patrol was out here, like the little tower that you saw in that photograph would have been right over here. The horse patrol would have run out of here. The civilian beach patrol would have been run out of here. So that's how they got their access to the beach. Of course, none of these sea grapes were here at the time. They weren't actually planted until the late 80s by one of the keeper's wives. It's a nice little panoramic view here. Yeah, we have to go back. You can see this cottage is ADA accessible. So I wanted to just show you a little bit here. So here was your cottage. This was not closed in until I believe either the late 30s or early 40s. This was your back porch. This was a breezeway. The roof was always there. Your cistern sat underneath here. So like the kids before plumbing, if you wanted to take a bath, you had a pan inside here and you had to heat it up on your little wood burning stove and pump your water out. And so you had your however often bath in there, but most of the time they just hopped in the water that surrounded the station. Now, Golombesky built a few things at the cottages. So he helped really restore the cottages, but he also built this little gazebo out here. And like I said, the sea grape wasn't here. And as soon as he got done building this, they got request after request after request. Can we have our wedding there? And unfortunately, he said, no, I'm sorry, this is federal property. We're not going to do that here. So here's the front of the station. We're going to cut over here. Now we're not going to go in the tower just yet. We're going to do a little walk around the tower. And I wanted to show you this because some of you on here probably know this gentleman's name. This is a memorial for Hib Castleberry. He was a pioneer in lighthouse preservation, founder or co-founder of numerous lighthouse preservation efforts, not only in the state of Florida, but across the country. So our president, Ken Herman, paid for not only the bench, but the sign to honor him and Martha, because they did so much work for us. And he was one of our former presidents as well. So if you ever come, you can hang out here. And knowing him like I did, if he knew that this was here, that would be bringing tears to his eyes. So last year, Ken Herman, the president, and I cleared all this area out. You couldn't see through this. This was all overrun with invasive snake grass, but now you can get a full walk around. And all the bricks you see here, the dredge actually broke down last year. And so most of our beach had eroded. And we found all these old oil house bricks after they destroyed the oil house when it was electrified. They didn't need it anymore. They just threw everything in the inlet. So we salvaged as many as we could. Old cross ties that, they replaced cross ties 4 times over the years. And again, they just threw everything in the inlet. So we salvaged as much as we could. We have a nice little junk pile. They put this rock groin in 1930. They had 6 spur jetties out there on the other side of the beach that really weren't doing anything. So here you have a nice little view. And we get people boating up to our beach here all the time because any beachfront in Florida is public beach 10 feet above high water line. So we get people out here all the time. And yes, they can be a nuisance because they do try to climb up here, even though there's a fence there, a rope fence, but still a fence that says, do not cross. Okay, so we were in the National Register. We put the sign in 2015. Unfortunately, there are some errors in here, which, whatever. Not the biggest sin in the world to have a couple errors in there, but hopefully we'll get that fixed at some point. And I want to show you one more thing. So we have 2 more memorials over here. So this was put in for one of the barefoot mailmen. Now, they weren't actually called barefoot mailmen at the time. That was a term that was actually coined by an author who wrote a fiction story about barefoot mailmen. But let's say this is before the lighthouse was even here. Oops. Let's come around this way. If you, say you live down in Fort Dallas, now you would call it Miami. But if you live down there and you had a friend in Palm Beach and you wanted to write them a letter, well, it could take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to arrive there. So the people down in Miami said, hey, we have enough people. Let's get a postal route. Well, the post office said, okay, how are you going to do it? Well, they subcontracted a route out. They did some actually on both sides of the state. And here they were given a mailbag and a machete, and Hamilton actually carried his own rifle. What they did was the machete was not only to fight off wildlife, but to hack a path through here. Well, they discovered if you walk down by the waterfront, you just take off your shoes and socks, roll up your pants, you get hard-packed sand, easy to walk. So you would leave your house on Monday morning in Palm Beach, and then you would stay overnight in what were called houses of refuge. Now, these were in warmer climates for shipwrecked sailors. If you survived your shipwreck and you made it to shore, you just started wandering on the beach. And if you could read, great. If you couldn't, it didn't matter because there were signs, and it was a hand with an arm pointing in which direction to go to, which was your closest house of refuge. So they would spend the night in was now the town of Delray. There was a house of refuge there, spend the first night there. They would get here on Tuesday, cross the inlet. In the inlets, there was a boat that would cross over, leave it on the other side. Then he would walk down to what's modern day Fort Lauderdale. There's a house of refuge there, spend the night, then make the rest of the trip to Miami the next day, spend the night, and then Thursday, reverse the process. And yes, there was a lot of walking, but it wasn't completely walking. So you either walk or, there's 48 miles that were done by foot or 20 miles that were done by boats. So they did have station boats. So Ed Hamilton and two of his buddies moved from Kentucky. They moved down here, and they were farmers. And to supplement their income, one of them decided he was going to take it up. Well, he didn't like it, so Ed took over. So in the morning of October, he shows up. He's not feeling well, decides he's going to take the mail anyways. Shows up the first night in Delray, spends the night, comes down here the next day. Now, you saw what the pictures of the inlet looked like before. So imagine even before that, in the 1880s. He shows up here and boats on the other side. The keeper down in Fort Lauderdale sees a stranger, says, "How did you get over here?" There were some nice fishermen who got me across. Didn't really trust the guy, but had nothing to go by until Ed didn't show up. Didn't show up the next day. Keep on going on. Now it's Saturday. His buddies back in Palm Beach go out to look for him to meet him and help him up because they don't know if he's still sick, if he's better or not. Well, he doesn't show up. So Sunday they go to the postmaster, say, "Hey, Ed didn't show up. We're going to get a party of people to come down here." So they paired up. One guy would be carrying either an 8 to 12 foot long pole. The other guy would have a rifle and all the mangroves that were out here. They came down here. They found Ed's clothes and the mail bag and the shotgun all hanging up here in the mangroves. They saw the boat on the other side, but everything else around here, alligator tracks. There had been so much rain, or what I said about the Everglades ending right over here. Well, they didn't really like the salt water. It hurt their eyes, so they came up on shore here. So all that rain pushed them down here. They were up on shore. Ed got in the water at some point here, got devoured by alligators. Don't know if they drug him back up here, if they took him back in the Everglades. Nothing was ever recovered of him. So they found everything in here. They actually did find the guy who took the boat. They arrested him, took him up to Tallahassee, tried him, but because of the lack of evidence, the guy got off scot-free. But ever since then, we've had the legend of the barefoot mailman. Okay, so now we're going to go inside the lighthouse. Actually, do we have time for one quick short story, Jeremy?
Sure.
Okay. This is a great one. So a couple of years ago, I got a phone call. Clint Stearman, the son of Don Stearman, was here. Donald was one of our keepers during the Coast Guard years, and Clint was actually born while they were here. So he grew up for a couple of years in this house. And he told me this great story. He goes, one day, there was, a lot of mascots over the years and a lot of guys coming and going. And he said, we had one of the crewmen was just absolutely beloved by everybody, not just on the base, but by the Hillsborough Club, the private club next door, the population. So much so, like when this crew member actually got hit by a car and broke his leg, everybody in the surrounding area actually pitched in for his medical care and made sure that this guy got better. And he was so beloved that he got a nickname. Well, his name was Beaver, and not Beaver Cleaver like you would think from Leave It to Beaver, but his name was Beaver. They started calling him Chief. So everybody that came from Coast Guard Station Fort Lauderdale or Coast Guard Station Miami came up here for the day, did their work, going back, and they all were talking about this great guy Beaver. Could not hear enough great stories. So Clint's like, I can't remember the guy's name who was in charge, but the guy who was actually in charge of the base, we just kept hearing about this guy, hearing about this guy. made up a record for him. And when he came here for inspection one day, he goes, this is the way my father tells me, he came, took my father, he was in his dress uniform, went in the cottages, went up the tower, went in the radio room, made sure everything was great. He goes, okay, Chairman, now muster up your men. So he goes, okay. So he musters up the men. He goes, and they were right out here. And he goes one by one, checking out their uniforms, finding out who they are, giving them their orders, they needed orders. Then he goes, wait a minute. He goes, Stearman, where's Beaver? Where's this chap Beaver I keep hearing about? And he's like, you could just see the eyes kind of poke back and forth. And Stearman's like, sir? He goes, you got a guy here. Everybody loves the guy. His name is Beaver. Where is him? How come he's not here? Okay. And he looks at the crew guys that are standing down here who are doing their best to look, stone-faced. So, okay, you want Beaver? He's like, yeah. He goes, leans over, whistles, goes, Beaver, come here. This little dog comes running up the side here, tail wagging, big smile, sits down right in front of him, wagging, puts his paw up to shake hands. And now everybody looks at the guy in charge, who's like shaking his head. He can't believe that this whole time that this was a dog that they were talking about. He thought it was an actual person. And he looks at Steer and goes, I have orders for this guy. He goes, well, can you please rescind the orders? Because we really want him to stay here as station mascot. And so fortunately, he had a really good sense of humor about it. And so everything was great. And you can't really see it here, but after Beaver died, they actually memorialized him as being one of the best station mascots that we ever had here. So imagine being in charge of a Coast Guard unit, thinking you have a guy there named Beaver, and it turns out to be a dog. And you have orders for him. Okay, so let's go inside the lighthouse. So as you can see, it was the United States Lighthouse establishment at the time. And like everybody else, the year was forged, not actually the first day of service, but it was made in 1906, Russell Wheel and Foundry in Detroit. Let's take a little gander up top here. So imagine hanging by a bosun's chair and painting this, or putting a plank of wood between these two and climbing up ladder by ladder by ladder, having to paint this thing every year. We come inside. Now, of course, everybody's favorite view, looking straight up. Now, we get questions all the time. Is your lighthouse haunted? Well, the only story we have was by a gentleman who's actually on this Zoom right now. This phone was plugged in at the time, and he was one of our Coast Guard auxiliaries who was down here at the time. Phone rings. He comes up here. Hello, lighthouse. No answer. Goes back out. A little bit later, phone rings, comes back in. Hello, lighthouse. No answer. Hangs up, goes back out. Now, he sees Ken, our president. He goes, Ken, somebody's been trying to call. And he's like, didn't understand. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, your phone? He's like, no, the phone inside. He goes, what phone inside? So they walk in here and he goes, this phone hasn't been activated in over a decade. So somehow this thing was ringing with no electrical service or service at all. So that is our one and only ghost story inside the lighthouse. If it is haunted, we have no idea. Okay, so let's head on up. Now this actually isn't colored in, but because of the camera between the dark and the color outside, this is the way it came out. That's your first window. We head on up. You can see everything here, how everything is slotted and screwed into place. So now we're looking south from the first window. A little view of our staircase. Now, another thing that we're trying to get put back into place, in our current admiral and its navigation chief love this idea. The original lighthouse station flag was on the ocean side of the tower, one level up. The second one actually extended from here out and tied down to the banister below. And this was they didn't fly the American flag from here, but they flew the service award pennant from this one. And then when that got retired, then they did hang the American flag from here. And the lighthouse kids would actually run out here when a ship was passing by. They would actually lower, raise, lower, raise, lower, raise. They call dipping the flag 3 times to any passing ship that would go by. And they would respond in kind, or if there was a steamship, they'd actually blow the whistle. So the kids absolutely love that. So it was a nice way from, you know, the lighthouse station to the captains and the crewmen on the ship to acknowledge each other. And so we're actually possibly getting that return to our lighthouse again next year as well. So now we're almost at the top, looking out towards the expanded jetty. And we are replacing all these windows. Every single one of like this window, you can actually stick your finger between these 2 panes and you can see your little finger stick through here. So we have had a lot of water intrusion. So we're getting historically accurate remakes done. So it's going to be aluminum. They're actually going to be impact glass, and we're going to eliminate all the water intrusion into the lighthouse. And that is not a cheap project. So here we are almost at the service level. So today we have this block and tackle, and we have a bucket at the bottom. And what we use this for is if we have a lot of objects to bring up, like if we're going to do power washing or a lot of things that we'd bring up, we just run them up the bucket instead of having to climb up all those stairs. So this is the service room. Now, this is unfortunately the one flaw of the technology is that it is an octagon and every wall is the same size, but they show up a little bit different here. You can see how they shrink and gain. So if you were not on watch, but you were still working that night, you were probably in this room if you're not out on the observation deck, waiting for something to do. Now, like I said, this is not the only lighthouse of this design. The other ones are Cape Charles, Virginia, Hog Island, and Cape Fear, which was unfortunately blown up and torn down. And what they had here was a wood burning stove, and this was out in your port outside, actually came up through the observation deck. Well, being in Florida, they didn't need this, so they removed this after a year, but the pipe they actually left up until 1919. And I'll show you exactly where that was, and why they left it in place is bizarre because it was actually right in the way of the observation deck. So we're heading on up. So if you're taking our tour, this is where you get out. And this was my fault. I didn't ask Carlos to put a plot in just at the door there. So you come out there, walk around, and you can see we have one access to our parapet up top there of the lantern. And keep this in mind for a little story I'll tell inside there. But look at where you are standing. So this is looking north. How much has changed since that 1914 photo? When the lighthouse was electrified, we didn't need 3 keepers. So the next year they eliminated the second assistant. So they actually sold this cottage and the storehouse, and Herbert Malcolm, who owned the Hillsborough Club, just bought it and moved it next door, and then turned it towards the ocean. So I was saying your stovepipe, actually you can see it, it's a little bit obstructed, but it actually was right here, right in the center of your walkway. So why they left that in place until 1919 from 1907 is beyond me. So I'm going to go around. So now we're looking at the ocean. Do a nice little zoom across. Now, our water is so clear that we will see shark, stingray, eagle ray, manatee, schools of fish, and you can see all that right here. And when I was telling them about the 3 coral reefs, you can't really see it by this bar, but it's right here. The start of the innermost coral reef starts right here, and it runs all the way down to Key West. You can see a little bit of it right through there. Now imagine it's 1910, 1911, and there's nothing else here. And the water was even clearer than it is now. The amount of fish they could have seen off of here must have been absolutely brilliant. So we're looking south. So This is Pompano Beach now, Fort Lauderdale down here, and way down in the distance is Miami. This was actually put in 64 along with this. And what they did here was they wanted to control the currents to go in a specific direction, because before all that, all this was shoaling up with sandbars. And for a while, the only navigable water was a little rim around the back end into here. So now we have a direct flow of water going into the intercoastal back there. Okay, so now you're going to get access to where people don't get. Okay, so this was an airlock system. It was kerosene vapor, so you couldn't have the door opening and closing and letting big gusts of air rush in and cause flame ups inside the lantern room. So they had one door here. You go inside here, close this one, then you access through this next door. Here's the air vent interior. The exterior ones are little horizontal ones down here. There's a 3-inch gap between here. And again, they didn't want to have a direct flow of air. Even though there isn't a direct flow of air, I was actually up here, I think, was it Irma? We had one of our tropical storms that was blowing through here. I was actually standing inside here holding a rag, and I'd hold it here, it was dead down. I put it in front here, and this thing was blowing out like you wouldn't believe. So even though it was not a direct line through, the amount of wind that can force through here in a tropical storm is unbelievable. So they had to make sure that everything was done properly, so you didn't have any flare-ups. And we didn't clean up our room for our photo shoot, so pardon our dust while we were actually working in here. So the keepers actually accessed the lantern underneath here. There was a ladder, an iron ladder, we still have it. They would actually get hung up inside here. So they would climb up here to access the wicks. They didn't actually climb up the stairs in the back here. This is unfortunately, I didn't have them close up on this either. These are the original gears, a couple of them anyways. Thomas Albury was one of our assistant keepers, and it wasn't uncommon for wife and kids to come up and say, kiss them goodnight before they went to bed. And Albury was up here with his wife and little daughter, Alice. And like most parents, you're not watching your kid all the time. Well, little Alice got her hands actually jammed in between these two gears. Albury shut the thing down real quick, backed the thing out, got her hand out, wrapped it up, got somebody else to sub for him. And then, there wasn't a direct route. They had to go down to the boat and go all the way up to Deerfield, or I'm sorry, to Delray to get a hospital. They never wrote in there what happened to her hand, so we don't know if it was mangled, if it was saved, but that was the one accident we know happened inside there. You can see our sophisticated operating system. This is actually just a pool timer. This is actually what's running our rotational system. We have a pool timer and 2 pool motors, 1.5 horsepower motors that aren't running congruently. There's one that's running, then we switch it next month, the other one goes. So we have an equal wear going back and forth between the two, but we have everything in a redundancy system. We have a fiber optic cable we just ran up there, so we're hoping to get all this as well as our new photocell timed up. So if light goes on during the daytime because of a storm, right now it's not going on, except the light is going on, but the motors aren't turning it. So it's a stationary lens. So we're hoping to time all that together. This is the brain of the new LED system. And of course, everybody's favorite shot, our giant lens. Now this is, oops, too far. It's 9 foot in diameter, 358 pieces of glass. And this is just an anomaly of the photo taking process, because this LED is actually squared up perfectly inside there. They actually have a tool that comes with this so that it gets the focal plane exactly right, because on the interior of this bar, there's a little dot that signifies the focal plane. So when they put this in there, they have the plate in there, they have this little cone, and when you get a plumb line or get a line that comes horizontally straight across here, it's at the exact focal height. You unscrew that, and then you screw this device into place. And we'll get to see that in just a moment, but everybody loves this. Now, speaking of Dan Spinella of Artworks Florida, I invited him to come see our lens because he'd never seen one like this before. When our light was broken down, one of the coastees actually took this prism out as a souvenir. And no matter how much we petitioned to have it returned, no questions asked, don't want you to lose your pension or anything like that. It's never been returned. So what we did was asked Dan, how much would this cost to replace? You know, we took measurements and he said, well, for a glass one, $20,000. And it's not going to have the same green tinge as the other ones will. But if you do an acrylic, it's only $2,500. The loss in power is not, that significant, and you get your green tinge. So we opted for that. So our lens is back to being complete, and you cannot tell. If I didn't point it out for you, you would never be able to tell which one is which. So we're going to move off that for a second. Our little handholds, those were 1907 OSHA approved security measures. Of course, I'm kidding, there was no OSHA, but that was your security measure. Imagine being out on this thing without having any types of security. It's not like you have a big railing there. 1960, Hurricane Donna. I don't know if you're familiar with that, you're part of the area, but Hurricane Donna obliterated this whole area. Coast Guard had put a weather vane in here. The officer in charge, John Ivdo Kimoff, was staying here with his stepson, Tim. They were the only ones who were on the entire barrier island. They were staying in the cottage, and they were smart. They tied a rope from their back door to the radio building, from the radio building to the front of the lighthouse, in case they needed to get from one building to the next. John was sure that the hurricane was going to blow these old cottages down. They didn't. What happened was the weather vane got disconnected. Coast Guard Miami says, John, get out there, fix it. So he did. He was in the radio building. Him and Tim used the rope to get to the lighthouse. There was, like I said, nothing there. So they're getting sandblasted the entire trip over. They somehow got the door open, hurricane force winds, got it secured, came up here. Now they couldn't go out the lantern door. So John came up that ladder that you saw down the side here, came over here to see what he needed, came back over here. Tim was down here, little 9-year-old Tim was down here with all the tools he needed. John would shout down, Tim would climb up, hand him what tools he needed, climb back down and stay as safe as he could. John came back over here, did all his work. Again, as hurricane force winds are whipping in, and he got this thing up and running, and they brought out the rest of the storm up here. They said there was brand new building, brand new house right over here. They just watched get blown away. And somehow the 1906 cottages still remained in place. Here's the access door that we use to get outside to do our cleaning and whatnot. If you're wondering what these little blue tape marks are, this was a project that we did. We had water intrusion. Ken and I were out there, and it was funny is we're not sure when they actually did the last puttying, but up here it was still kind of putty. The lower you went, it just gradually became dust. And so each one of those marked a spot where we were having water intrusion. The floor lights, you didn't have electricity inside here. So in order to get light for the keepers to work down there, light coming off here, showing down through these floor lights. And when the Coast Guard took over, they painted over everything. At some point they scraped it off, but this is all another one of our projects that we want to actually polish all these back up to being, usable and to see through them. So here we are inside. A view very few people ever get in their lives. Now look, here's the prism, here's the gap in between. And the lampist had to know exactly what angle to put everything at so that the light was coming from here, transferring all the way through, and it didn't come to the bullseye, of course, but about 10 to 12 feet outside the towers where all these lens rays came together. Out the bullseye, and again, anomaly of the actual photography because the horizon level is actually flat across, and this is all uniform throughout. And just like a camera, it's inverted when you look through it. When we clean this, I'm typically inside here, Ken will be on the outside, and we'll do one section at a time, working our way down, making sure that all the residue is taken off. Anything wet has been taken off because we don't want anything to bake inside there. So here's the LED from Sea Light, a company out of Australia. A lot of lighthouses are actually transitioning to these. We were actually the first lighthouse with a rotating light to actually get one. So they actually had to go up and over. You can see where they came in through and brought it down. Now, if you're wondering what the aluminum foil is for, well, their biggest concern was because we don't have curtains and we don't rotate 24 hours a day. Well, if the sun is hitting the lens just right, we're actually going to start melting the cable. So we gave it about a month. We noticed it was starting to melt. So we crinkled up some aluminum foil, and it works wonders at dispersing the light and the heat. We've not had a single issue with it. So when ours comes on, we're only at 50%. And that, they wanted us down to maybe 25% or 15%. But because we were tagged as the brightest lighthouse in the world in active, aid to navigation, we said we'd really like to keep it at 50%, and we'll purchase a new one, which is going to be $1,500, I believe is what it is, to get a new one in case it burns out. So our lens rotates, all of these come on. You can change the color of these, or if you have a fixed lens, but you have a rotating light inside, you can actually have these go in sequence lighting up around. So that was one of the nice features of that. So imagine having to carry all of these and the framework up from the bottom by hand, and then spending the time in this hot room. And it gets hot in this room. It gets like 115, 120 degrees in here at times. And assembling this lens all by yourself. That was the job of the lampist. They did incredible work. So there's your 360 of that. And there we are. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully it was a view that you've never gotten to see before. And if you're ever down, when we do our big fundraising gala, that is the only time we open the lens room up for our guests to come up. I'll be sitting at the top of the stairs there, and we don't let people actually get face to face with it, but we let people come up the stairs and actually get as close to the lens as possible.
Excellent, Ralph. Fantastic. That was great. What an excellent job with the VR tour, and thanks to Carlos also.
Yeah.
You can't hear them, but people are applauding.
Yes, Carlos is on here. Thank you so much for the use of your camera and for doing this for us. And that is going to actually be a link that we're going to put online pretty soon.
Okay.
So you can go back yourself and take your own tour at some point.
Excellent. So I was just a couple of things I was going to mention. I met Hib Castleberry back in 1999 at a conference in Key West, and he was kind of a legend of Florida lighthouses. So it's great that you have that memorial there for him. Awesome. I was just going to mention the weird phone call, that phone ringing that wasn't supposed to be working anymore. It reminds me, I met a guy from England who wrote a book called Phone Calls from the Dead. There's actually a lot of documented cases of things like that. So it's not entirely out of the ordinary. I'll just say that I have an open mind on that. So that was pretty interesting. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. Okay. One of them is, how many steps are to the top, and how tall is the lighthouse? Okay.
Let's start with steps. So the sign at the bottom says 175 steps, and I just did a little posting about that. There's actually 179 steps to the very top, but that also includes the lantern room. To get the observation deck, it's 167. So there was a newspaper article that came out in the 70s that got it wrong. And ever since then, it's like been carved in stone. It's 175 steps. And no matter what you say, when you show to disprove that, there are still people who want to fight me on it. So I did a video that actually went all the way up the lighthouse showing how many steps there were. And I actually got somebody who emailed me and said, I still don't believe it. It's like, okay, there's nothing I can do to help you.
Fake news.
Yeah, the focal plane of the lens is 135, and the very top, I believe, is 142.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What do you use to clean the prisms?
Okay, so what we do is we put on cotton gloves, and then we use a combination of isopropyl alcohol and distilled water, and it's a 4-to-1 mixture that we do. And the reason we're wearing the gloves is because the oils, we don't want the oils to get on the prisms. So even though the isopropyl alcohol is going to eat all of that oil away, we still, just to be sure, we use the gloves. So I'll do one prism, like I'll start at the top, Ken will start at the bottom, and we'll kind of meet at the middle and we'll bypass. And what we do is when we're done, we sometimes use microfiber, but really a cotton towel to dry them off works even better than microfiber, because microfiber tend to push everything around. So we'll go through, and being a prism, it's really tough to see because you'll be looking at it and it's like, oh, I see this. Well, it's actually not on this lens. It'll be like on two below it. So we try and figure out exactly where it is. But we do that twice a year. As need, but typically it's twice a year. January is a great time. The summer one is brutal. The second summer clean that we did, I weighed myself because I was in there the first time. I found out how hot it was in there, and I weighed myself. And when I got back home, I had lost 12 pounds in sweat. I drank a gallon of water, cramped up and passed out, and slept for about 2 hours.
Wow.
It gets brutally hot in that room. So now we're actually we put up a little curtain out there and try and do it as fast as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the typical formula. That's the recommended formula the Coast Guard gives is the isopropyl alcohol and distilled water. And I think they also recommend, like, per quart, I think it is a drop of woolite. I don't know if you do that, but it's supposed to cut down on the static electricity. I don't know if it really makes a difference or not, but
yeah, we never had an issue with that.
Yeah. Somebody asked, what did they use to clean the prisms at the time the lighthouse was built? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. Do you know the answer to that, Ralph?
Offhand, I do not know.
I think it was pretty simple. They may have just used water, but they would typically clean a lens just about every day, I think, back in those days.
Well, see, we were lucky. Like when it first started, they were cleaning it because it was brand new, so they wanted to make sure everything stayed well. But then they had one issue where it smoked up inside there and smoked up the entire lantern room. So they spent 4 days, actually, the entire work day was cleaning the lens, cleaning all the lantern glass out. But after that, it became kind of a monthly, and then they kind of pushed off and they could see exactly when they actually needed to do it. But what the actual solution was, they didn't write anything down, so we have no idea.
Right. We've got one more section to this event today we're going to do in a moment. I see one more question that just came up. Does this virtual tour qualify you for a passport stamp? I think that's a joke. That's a good one. I like that. Thank you, William Benny. Probably not, although it's not a bad idea. Maybe future events we should, well, I don't know how we would do. We have to do virtual stamps via Zoom. It gets kind of complicated, but it's an interesting idea. So we got one more section to this event, and it's just something for fun. If you saw the Point Arena or Bolivar Point events, we talked about movies that were shot at those lighthouses, and Hillsboro Inlet also has its share of movies that have been shot at least partly there, and I'm not saying they're necessarily good movies, but there have been a couple of movies. So we're going to
commercial
clips and a commercial, and Ralph, I want you to tell the story of that commercial. But first, we'll show clips from these two movies, and I'm actually going to bring them up on my screen. And the first one we're going to talk about is called The Wild Rebels, a 1967 movie. Just give me a moment and I'll do screen sharing here. And I'll say a little bit about it and show the clips, and Ralph, you can add anything you want to add to it. Let me go ahead and share the screen. And with Zoom, you sometimes, with video, when videos are played, it's a little jerky. It's not necessarily smooth, but hopefully you'll all see this. So there's the poster for the movie, The Wild Rebels, 1967, written and directed by the immortal William Greffe, Grefe, with an accent mark on the second E, starring Steve Alamo, as you see, who was mostly known as a singer. He actually hosted a TV series for a while called Where the Action Is. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, description of this movie says a stock car driver goes undercover as the wheelman for a motorcycle gang, and it's rated a 2.3 by users out of 2.3 out of 10 on the IMDb. So it's not exactly highly regarded. And I'm going to play you the trailer, which doesn't, I think right near the end of the trailer, you see a little bit of the stairs of the lighthouse, but it's just, I think it's pretty funny. So I'm going to play the trailer for the movie here.
The wildest of the wild ones. Savage, sadistic, thrill-hungry. The wild rebels. They live for kicks, love for kicks, kill for kicks. Starring Steve Alamo, Willie Pastrano, John Vella, and Bobby Byers. Too much woman for any one man.
I don't dig you.
You dig this?
The Wild Rebels. It's now. It's what's happening. Hate angry. They know no law. A brutal action shocker. The Wild Rebels, Technicolor.
Actually, you see the base of a lighthouse there. I'll show. Well, maybe you want to say something now, Ralph, before I show these other clips.
Okay.
The interior, well, you explain it, the exterior and the interior here.
Okay. So the exteriors were shot at Cape Florida, just to the south of us, before it was restored. And the interiors were shot at Hillsborough. And when you watch these clips, if Jeremy shows the one where they're looking out the window, you can see the actual legs of the lighthouse, Hillsborough, in there. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what you're actually watching is from an old TV show called Mystery Science Theater, where they were forced to watch bad movies and they made fun of them. So if you hear other voices in there, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I love Mystery Science Theater 3000. And this is, I forget the guy's name with the robot friends here. I'm sure you know all the names. Oh, yeah. Ralph, but yeah, I used to watch it sometimes. It's a lot of fun. So you're going to hear them commenting on it while the movie clip is playing here. So here's the first clip.
Lighthouse?
Oh, it's for Winnebagos.
Yeah, well, it's up to the Navy now. It's out of our jurisdiction.
Oh. Come on, baby. No, it's too close. Stop calling me baby.
Oh, great hideout. If they have to spend any time there, they can eat the bricks, I guess.
Oh, look, they're in a Nautilus, you guys.
It's like the time tunnel. Don't shoot the car, we need that.
Oh, sorry, accidentally shot a cop, sorry.
Load it up, but it's just like shooting ducks in an alley.
I think it's fish in a barrel, but I know what you mean, and you'll know what we mean after this.
Okay, and second clip.
Here you go, Hoss. Nice shooting, little Joe.
Oh.
My hair stuck. Oh.
I'm old enough to drive and drink, but not be in a war. What do you think?
Hey, it's Diana Rigg.
Join us.
Getting enough kicks now, baby? Yeah. If you got something to say it.
You killed a tree, Banjo.
Oh, excuse me.
I just want to hold off on that for a minute. I just want to mention some trivia I read on the Internet Movie Database. An actor named Jeff Gillen, who played the non-speaking role of Fats, and I believe he's killed on the inside the lighthouse in that scene, I think. Also played the infamous Santa Claus who kicked Ralphie down the ramp in A Christmas Story, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So I thought that was pretty funny. So anything else you want to say about Wild Rebels before we move on here, Ralph?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not seeing the culmination of it where the all those guys get shot inside the lighthouse, but it was just an awful movie. But when they were here filming it, that's when Steve actually did one of his episodes of Where the Action Is. So he did a bunch of songs and he had a bunch of old teeny boppers on site, and it was a Dick Clark show. So he was on site as well for that.
Wow, I didn't know that part. Yeah, I read that he was good friends with Dick Clark. That's how he got that TV show. So we're going to move on to another terrible movie called Uninvited from 1987, a little more recent, starring George Kennedy and Alex Cord. It actually had at least a couple of fairly well-known people in it. I don't think they were in it that much though, but the description says a bunch of young people are invited to a Caribbean cruise on a gangster's yacht to distract the attention of the authorities. Unfortunately, a mutant cat which escaped from a test laboratory also gets on board and kills most of the passengers. So it's quite the plot. Anything you want to say before I show this clip, Ralph?
Yeah, so this is basically the same guys from Mystery Science Theater. Now they're now doing something called riff tracks. So you're not going to actually see them in there, but you're going to hear some voices in this. And this is a movie that's so bad you actually root for the cat to kill everybody because everybody is so annoying in this movie.
Okay. All right. So here's a brief clip from Uninvited.
Using a different puppet every time now.
Now those other guys should have just tried not getting bit.
Oh God, I hope we see this footage 8 or 9 more times.
You okay? Ah!
It won't leave us alone as long as we're the only floating object!
I have deep insights into its floating object-based motivation!
We'll be miles away by the time he figures out the combination on this thing.
And his long con to get a free briefcase finally pays off. And in a shocking twist, it ends in a Malibu Sands episode of Saved by the Bell.
Sorry to keep you waiting, but understandably, due to the storm, communications are backed up.
Communications, they just back up like a septic tank.
Monster, poisonous cat. Well, I'm afraid your ordeal must have been too much for you.
But you're safe here in San Dominica, Bedos, Jamaica.
All right. Okay, let me get out of screen sharing here. Okay. It's fun seeing these clips, but I'm glad I don't have to watch all of either of those movies. As much as I enjoy bad movies, those look too bad to even watch for more than a few minutes. So
yeah, you can't watch them without a commentary track.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think that kind of saves them. Ralph, you had this, I don't know if you want to say anything more about those, but you also had the story of the commercial, which is pretty good.
Yeah, so I can't remember which keeper was here at the time. It might have been Eve Dokimov. A local Chevy dealer wanted to shoot on the grounds. Coast Guard said, yeah, okay. So John would not have approved this himself, but the Coast Guard overruled him and said, yeah, you can come on. So there was a brand new Corvette. I'm not sure exactly what year it was. The brand new Corvettes were out and they wanted to shoot it with the lighthouse in the background. So they drove it on site. They brought it down to the beach. And John's like, what are you doing? It's like, this is where we want to put it. He's like, don't park it down there. You're never going to get your car out of there. No, we're going to put it down here. So he goes, okay, it's your car. So they drive it down there. They somehow get it onto the beach on the inlet side, set up all the cameras and everything, do the shot. By the time they're filming, the sand is already eating up the tires and it's just going lower and lower and lower. And he's like, I told you idiots not to put it there. So they had to get a tow truck on site and tow the brand new Corvette out, and they scraped the heck out of it. So they basically trashed a brand new Corvette.
Wow. Too bad that commercial is not available anywhere to see at this point, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. I think we're gonna wind things down here. But Ralph, thank you so much. You really did a great job today, and you are the man, the historian for Hillsborough Inlet. There's no doubt about that. And again, I recommend your book to everybody. The title of the book, and again, is, and how do they get it, Ralph?
The Almost Complete History of the Hillsborough Inlet Lighthouse. And it's in second edition now. And what I do is I broke it up into 3 volumes, because one volume, it's literally the size of an old phone book. So the first volume just covers the origin story till the first day, the day before the first day of service. Volume 2 is the lighthouse service era and all the keeper stories included in that. And then part 3 is 1940 through to last year, December 31st of last year. And I tried doing it on Amazon. There's a digital version on Amazon, but their print version was awful. So I pulled it from that. And now print is only available on lulu.com. They are a print on demand service.
Yeah.
And the quality is much better.
Okay, excellent. Carlos Arenas just posted that the lighthouse apparently also appears in The Sopranos. Is that correct?
Oh, I didn't know that, Carlos.
Yes, it appears on the episode that Corrado Soprano comes to Miami. Only for a few seconds.
Cool. That's good to know, though. I love keeping track of those kinds of things.
And that's actually our camera guy.
Yeah. Oh, Shalana, my friend Shalana Millard says she says she has the Kindle version of the book, so it is available on Kindle as well.
Yes.
So
that's the only thing that's on Amazon.
On Amazon, right? Excellent. Yeah. I'm proud to say I have a hard copy of the original volume that you sent me, Ralph. That, as you said, it's as big as and heavier than most old phone books. So it's quite an impressive volume.
That's how
that's the one. That's the one. Yeah. But you did a great job. So thank you so much, Ralph. Thank you all for taking part today. As always, we always enjoy seeing you all at these events. Check out uslhs.org if you're not already familiar with all the things the Society, U.S. Lighthouse Society does, the tours. Got a lot of great tours coming up this year and next year, the passport program, the preservation grants that are in progress right now. Anything you want to add, Jeff, about the Society or anything else?
No,
Jeff?
No, thanks, Ralph, for all your information and knowledge. We appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me do this.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, everyone. And take care. We'll be seeing you again soon. Take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
And